Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping into a quieter corner of the ancient world. Not the stuff of pyramids or conquering armies. No, tonight you are a dentist, an ancient Egyptian dentist. You rise with the sun wrapped in linen, stretching under the soft crackle of the desert breeze. Somewhere nearby, a donkey brays perhaps in sympathy with your first patient, who has awoken with an aching molar and a very bad attitude. You step outside your mudbrick home, the Nile's mist barely lifting as the day begins. Papyrus reeds flutter in the morning hush. You trudge through the narrow alleyways, sandal straps dusty, already thinking not of kings or tombs, but of calcium deposits, and the odd chance someone might try to pay you with barley again. Ancient dentistry wasn't glamorous, but it was essential. And in a land where everyone smiled like they just bit into gravel, your services were in surprisingly high demand. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move toward your workroom, which smells faintly of myrrh, crushed coriander, and something else you can't quite place. Maybe it's the linen bandages you've boiled 3 times already. Maybe it's the crocodile dung from yesterday's cavity paste. Whatever it is, it clings to your tunic like a polite but persistent dinner guest. Your first patient is an older man from the next village, already sitting on your clay bench, clutching his cheek. He's got a low growl of pain and a deep mistrust of copper instruments, which makes for an energetic combination. His issue, likely a cracked molar from eating bread laced with sand. Yes, even the finest Egyptian flour had the consistency of artisanal sandpaper. You crouch beside him, breathing through your nose, gently pressing along his jaw. There's swelling, there's heat, there's also the strong aroma of onions, which he swears he hasn't eaten since breakfast. He's lying, obviously. Historically, tooth problems were endemic in ancient Egypt. Between their heavy reliance on coarse bread and the occasional stone-ground misfire, nearly everyone had dental issues by midlife. Even mummies have been found with worn enamel abscesses and impacted teeth. It's no wonder your practice is booming. You don't advertise. You don't have flyers. People just find you because you don't scream when you see pus. You offer the man a bit of linen to bite down on, while you prepare a poultice fig sap, some green malachite powder for aesthetic reasons, and a touch of mint to make it smell slightly less like foot. You dab the mixture into the crevice with your copper probe, carefully smoothed with riverstone, because sharp tools, your bad Yelp reviews. Feels better already, he mumbles. You nod, though you know it's placebo wrapped in herbal optimism. You give him a small charm on a string and eye of Horus, because hey, if you can't clean the tooth, at least protect it mystically. He pays with 2 onions and a very suspicious-looking egg. You hang the egg by the window for good luck. The flies agree enthusiastically. Historians still argue whether there were true dentists in ancient Egypt, or if it was more of a general healer's duty. Some sources suggest a kind of proto-oral specialist existed, while others say it was whoever wasn't busy embalming that day. But whether you trained for years, or just had a knack for not fainting at the smell of gum rot, one thing is clear. Your village appreciates you. A young boy waits outside, chewing a stalk of papyrus like it's a treat. His mother says he's been grinding his teeth at night. You ask if he's stressed. She looks confused. No, she replies, he's just dramatic. You examine the boy. No major issues, just some wear. You hand him a chewed lotus root and tell him it's magic. He believes you completely and runs off smiling like he's never had a tooth in his life. Back inside, you sit for a moment. The sun is climbing. Your back twinges in that way it always does before noon. You sip barley water, letting its faint sourness settle your stomach. It's warm, slightly gritty, and tastes vaguely of patience. You glance over at your toolkit laid out on a woven mat. Your favorite probe, a small bronze mirror, twine, bits of dried myrrh, a bowl of fresh river mud for poultices. You'll need to clean the tools later, maybe in the sun, maybe in the small fire pit. Your cat lounges beside them like a tiny, judgmental sphinx. A knock at the door. A middle-aged woman stands outside her head, wrapped in blue linen. It's my husband, she says. He hasn't slept in 2 nights. He says it's his tooth. But I think he's avoiding chores. You nod solemnly. I'll bring the strong poultice. Bring something that makes him quiet, she adds. You do your best. You step back into the rising warmth of the day, your pouch of supplies swaying gently at your side. The street outside hums with the soft rustle of linen robes, the cluck of chickens underfoot, and that ever-present whisper of wind over sand. You head toward the patient's home, mentally rehearsing your most diplomatic way of saying, "This will sting." Again, the man in question is slouched beneath a shaded awning, his eyes closed, and a cloth over his brow like some over-dramatic noble. His wife gives you a look that reads, "Fix him," or at least make him stop talking. You kneel beside him, lifting the cloth and gently probing his jaw. Sure enough, it's a swollen gum near the back. Could be an infection. Could be guilt over not helping with the laundry. You won't judge. You open your pouch and withdraw a few humble yet vital tools among them. A bundle of frayed papyrus reed, thin as a quill, and stained faintly green from repeated use. This is your toothbrush. Or rather, one of many kinds. Ancient Egyptian oral hygiene was ahead of its time in some ways. People used chew sticks, reeds frayed into bristle tips to scrub their teeth. If they had money, they might even dip them in salt and natron Egypt's beloved all-purpose desiccant, useful for both teeth and mummies. Open, you say. The man groans. You gently scrape along his molars, with the reed releasing a scent reminiscent of old dates and melancholy. Under your breath, you hum a tune, a soft one passed down through dentists, supposedly to keep the hand steady. Or maybe just to drown out the patient's whining. His breath smells like old beer. That tracks. Most people in this village drink beer like water, literally. It's safer than Nile water, and a staple of daily life. But beer has its price, especially when paired with honeyed bread and tough lentils. A plaque paradise. You rinse his mouth with a cup of warm water, steeped in crushed mint leaves, and the faintest dash of vinegar. He gags dramatically. You ignore him. To finish, you press a paste your own blend today, into the sorghum. It's made of rock salt dried mint and powdered celery seed, held together by a dab of honey. Not bad as these things go. Certainly better than the more fringe recipes, which included burnt mouse tails or donkey hoof scrapings. You've tried them. They were ineffective and wildly unpopular with donkeys. As you pack up, his wife slips you a small jar of sesame oil as payment. That's a good day's haul. You bow politely and head back toward your workroom, passing a small girl brushing her teeth with a branch. She gives you a proud grin. 3 teeth are missing. You give her a thumbs up anyway. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians practiced oral hygiene for health, or ritual purity, or both. Some argue the habit stemmed from the deeply spiritual importance of the mouth in funerary beliefs. Others say they just didn't like the feeling of sand stuck between their bicuspids. You personally lean toward both, plus the bonus of not smelling like old garlic all day. Back in your practice space, you take a moment to rinse your hands with lemon-scented water. Not for sanitation. It doesn't do much, but because it makes your skin feel like you've done something fancy. You sit for a moment beside your wooden shelf, where several toothbrushes are drying in the sun like sunbathing porcupines. You glance at your water jug and remember you're supposed to filter more river water through your linen sieve. Later. Right now, you want to sit, feel the breeze, and maybe eat the fig you've hidden from your apprentice. Of course he barges in just then, young Khufu arms flailing eyes wide. A goat got into the herb basket, he says breathlessly. It ate the fennel. And the label. You nod slowly. So we don't know what's in the paste now. He nods faster. You sigh. The paste was mostly crushed cloves, but you'll double-check before using it on anyone with political connections. Your afternoon patient arrives right on time, a noblewoman's servant. He's young, polite, and looks like he hasn't slept since the Nile last flooded. You seat him on the same clay bench and begin your exam. Do you floss, you ask, mostly to see what face he'll make. He blinks. I don't know what that is. Neither do I, you reply. Just checking. The servant winces as you find a cavity in a front tooth, small but sharp. You'll patch it with a bit of powdered alum and ground barley. A temporary fix, really. But he only needs to smile through ceremonial dances. No one will check his molars. You get to work humming softly again, while outside the village continues its lazy rhythms. A boy chases a hoop down the dusty lane. 2 old men argue about grain prices. Someone sings a lullaby to a baby, though the baby seems deeply unimpressed. Inside the paste, goes in the servant breathes easier, and you catch a rare smile of gratitude. It's not every day someone walks away with less pain than they came in with. You send him off with a stick of myrrh to chew soothing antiseptic and fashionable if you squint. Later, as the sun tilts westward, you line up your toothbrushes for cleaning, dipping them into a shallow bowl of lotus water. You hum again, this time for yourself, while your cat nudges your elbow like a needy scroll. You glance down at the reeds, some worn to nubs, others still sharp and green. The tools of your trade gentle and simple. No drills, no screaming. Just patience, herbs, and a lot of brushing. You think to yourself, cozy indeed. You wake up from your late afternoon nap, not because of a noise, but because the scent of incense wafting in from your neighbor's window has become strangely assertive. Probably more frankincense than strictly necessary, but hey, it's their nose, not yours, stretching your arms until your back makes the noise of papyrus being unrolled. You prepare for your next patient. It's time to gather your most treasured possessions, your dentist's tools. You kneel before your mat laid out on a low bench and begin arranging everything into its correct place. Like a priest at an altar, you line up each item with a quiet kind of reverence, though you're also muttering under your breath about the time your apprentice used your bronze spatula to butter bread. First your copper probes. You've had them hammered smooth by a friend who moonlights as a chisel artisan. They're well worn with thin handles wrapped in faded linen for grip. One is slightly bent at the tip, from that time you attempted to extract a pebble from an overly suspicious molar. You've kept it for sentimental reasons. Then, there's your toothpick bundle, a clutch of dried palm fronds trimmed to needle-fine points. You soak them in vinegar between uses to ward off evil spirits, and possibly bacteria. No one's quite sure if it helps, but it does give your tools that sharp, pickled scent of legitimacy. Next, a small bronze mirror, polished daily, and currently reflecting your apprentice's face as he sneaks behind you for a honey date. You don't turn around. You simply say, "That jar's labeled ointment." He freezes. You smile. You continue arranging a pouch of crushed herbs, smelling of lavender and maybe thyme. A tiny ivory spatula for paste application. And of course, your incense burner shaped like a lion, crouching over a lotus blossom. It's been in your family for 3 generations, once used to mask the scent of embalming fluid, now mostly covering up gingivitis. You light a cone of incense and let the thick, sweet smoke curl around the room. It helps your patients relax, or at least distracts them. One particularly chatty merchant once confessed he forgot why he came in after 10 minutes of clove-scented fog. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian dentistry was truly clinical or more spiritual in nature. Some suggest a blend herbal knowledge paired with ritual. You personally are a firm believer in both. Why not stuff a cavity with acacia resin and chant a few words to Thoth while you're at it? Worst case, it buys you time while the resin sets. Today's mid-evening case is a middle-aged woman named Niti, who insists she's been cursed with tooth lightning. You assure her you've handled worse, like the time someone claimed their wisdom tooth was trying to communicate with the afterlife. She lies back, eyes closed, and you examine her teeth in the amber glow of sunset. There's no lightning, but there is a fissure along the second premolar. Classic grain grit abrasion. You dab a salve of onion skin resin and a dash of ground chamomile into the crack. Then you burn a thin thread of myrrh incense, wave it in a figure 8 around her head, and mutter a line about releasing the tension of Set. She nods solemnly. Whether she believes it or not doesn't matter. She leaves smiling pain-dulled gums numbed her soul, presumably unscrambled. After she departs, you inspect your tools again. Some need sharpening. Not in the sense of modern steel blades, but gently honing the edges on river stone, maintaining that satisfying balance between function and gentleness. You've learned the hard way that an overly sharp probe just means more screaming and more apologetic dates stuffed in your ear. A knock. A young man with a chipped tooth enters holding a palm leaf like it's a referral letter. You squint at it. This just says, "He makes good lentil stew." He shrugs. "My aunt said that would work." It does. You check the chip. Clean break. Likely from biting down on a burnt bean. You whip up a patching compound using powdered seashell's vinegar and a tiny smear of honey, what you call your plaster of pearly whites. He winces, but sits still. That counts as success. The patch holds. You hand him a stick of licorice root to chew for strength and sweetness. He thanks you with a clumsy bow and 3 apricots. One has teeth marks. You accept them all with grace. Later you lean back in your chair and watch the smoke trail from your incense burner. It curls upward like a cobra in slow motion. The tools on your mat catch the golden light copper glowing linen, wrinkled just right. Spatula gleaming with quiet purpose. You think of your father who taught you this trade, and of the day he first placed a tiny bronze probe in your hand. You'd used it immediately on a patient's nostril. It hadn't gone well. Still, he'd laughed. "You'll learn where teeth are eventually," he'd said. Just don't poke until they bleed. And you didn't. Well, not often. The room quiets as the last sliver of sun slides below the horizon. Your apprentice begins sorting herbs by texture again, rough medium, and feels like goat. You close your eyes for a second, feeling the hum of incense, the gentle creak of your chair, and the soft distant bray of a donkey who may or may not be judging you. Your apprentice is humming tunelessly, sorting herbs with the kind of focus usually reserved for counting cats in a market. You use the moment of peace to prepare the next batch of toothpaste, a ritual that requires patience, a good nose, and the ability to keep sneezing to a minimum. You kneel beside your preparation bench and untie the little bundles of raw ingredients, hanging like sleepy bats from the ceiling. Each one has a smell more complicated than its name. One labeled simply mint smells like ambition and leftover sandals. Another, crushed iris, smells like you're not supposed to breathe too deeply. Ancient Egyptian toothpaste wasn't the smooth, spearmint-flavored swirl we know today. No, it was a rough, rebellious paste that fought back. The kind that left your teeth cleaner, but also made you seriously question your life choices. You grab a handful of rock salt, sharp-edged like mini pyramids, and crush it gently with a pestle until it resembles chalky snow. Next comes dried mint. You toss in a pinch, partly for breath freshening, partly to prove you care. You follow that with ground peppercorns, mostly because tradition says so. And finally, a bit of dried iris flower, because someone in a scroll said it restores the gums. You have your doubts, but it does smell vaguely noble. And then the final touch, a fragment of burnt donkey hoof, scraped fine, and flicked into the mix like a spice no one wants to admit is in there. Historians still argue whether this ingredient was medicinal or just someone's way of using leftovers from the butcher. Either way, the smell is robust. You grimace, stir the powder together, and slowly add water until it turns into a gritty gray paste with the consistency of wet chalk and the personality of a cranky ostrich. You dip in your toothbrush reed and give it a test scrub. It fizzes slightly. Your gums recoil. You nod approvingly. Your apprentice watches with horror. Taste, you ask, offering the brush. He shakes his head so hard his braid nearly flies off. Good instinct, you say, and store the paste in a small alabaster jar, which you label in red ink. Use only on the brave. Or the pharaoh. You remember an earlier attempt, your ill-fated pomegranate and bone meal blend, which had to be discontinued after it made a merchant hiccup for 2 days straight. Lesson learned: fruit is for eating, not smearing on molars. Your next patient arrives right on time, a scribe named Jadet, who talks faster than a swarm of bees and insists on describing each twinge in his tooth with the precision of a love letter. He sits mouth wide open while you nod, murmuring as if you haven't already identified the problem by his second sentence. It's plaque, lots of it, enough to sculpt into a tiny obelisk. You begin your careful work with a copper scraper, humming a lullaby to keep the pace slow. Outside, the sun filters through your reed curtain, casting golden lines across Jedit's cheeks. He makes small noises of discomfort, like a very dramatic lyre being plucked badly. You pause occasionally to let him rinse with myrrh-steeped water, which he swears tastes like fermented laundry. You assure him it's quite fashionable among noblemen. He does not look convinced. The cleaning takes time, but by the end, his teeth gleam like sun-polished limestone. He bows profusely, thanks you with a drawing of a goose wearing sandals. You're not sure if it's a tip or a warning, and promises to chew fewer dates. Later, you make a small, personal jar of toothpaste this time, with ground frankincense sea salt and a pinch of dried chamomile flower. This one smells better, less like a blacksmith's cupboard, more like a spa for very nervous fish. You try a little brushing, slowly letting the flavor roll over your tongue. Salty floral and oddly calming. Your cat watches unimpressed, licking its paw, like it invented oral hygiene. Just as you're finishing up, Khufu returns, holding a small clay pot. This was dropped off by a courier, he says, from the temple district. You open it. Inside is a glob of dark blue paste, sticky and rich-smelling. There's a note scratched on parchment. For ceremonial uses only, not for chewing. May stain sandals. You sniff the paste. Strong, earthy. A blend of lapis powder wine sediment and something that smells like regret. You're intrigued. You place it on your top shelf far from your lunch, outside the sounds of the village shift. The high sun wanes, children's laughter fades, and a vendor yells half-heartedly about pickled fish. You clean your tools one by one, rubbing each with linen and letting the scents of mint and metal mingle in the air. The wind picks up slightly, stirring the fringe of your robe. You sit for a moment sipping barley water, your hands tingling from the mint, your tongue still buzzing faintly from the salt. You've spent the better part of your life perfecting pastes no one thanks you for, until their teeth hurt. A quiet job, a cozy one. Painful, yes, but appreciated. You smile softly, which makes your own molar ache just a little. The day is far from over, and yet the heat has taken on that heavy, almost theatrical quality that makes your tunic stick to your back, and your sandals feel like they're melting into the earth. You throw a fresh linen cloth over your shoulder, check that your tool pouch is tied snugly at your waist, and step outside for your next appointment, a house call. You sigh not out of dread, but because house calls usually mean a scenic detour, possibly involving donkeys' poultry, or in today's case, a full-grown hippopotamus blocking the footpath. You trudge through the dusty village trail, papyrus fields to your left, mudbrick walls to your right. A pair of children run past, one yelling about a cursed goose, the other holding a stick, like it's a royal scepter. You smile faintly. Dentistry is serious work, yes, but the world never stops being ridiculous. As you near the river's edge, you hear it the unmistakable grunt of a hippo lounging in a shallow bank. You slow your pace. Sure enough, there it is, a great hulking beast, blinking lazily in the sun, half-submerged ears, twitching like it's mildly irritated by your mere existence. You could go around. You could also stand perfectly still and reconsider your career choices. But you're expected, and more importantly, the patient in question is the village brewer's grandmother. And if you help her, the odds of getting paid in cold barley beer skyrocket. So you wait, patiently, watching the hippo blink and sigh, as if it too has had a long day, and no intention of moving. After a few moments, a small boy shows up and throws a handful of lotus petals in the water. The hippo grunts, shifts its massive weight, and finally saunters downstream with a look that says, "You're welcome, mortal." You nod in gratitude to both boy and beast, and continue on your way the trail, now clear the sun, now directly in your face. You arrive at a modest home where the brewer's grandmother sits on a cushioned stool, shaded by a linen canopy. She greets you with a smile that reveals precisely 4 teeth, 2, upper 2, lower none of which are happy about their continued employment. You kneel beside her and begin your examination. The complaint. My jaw clicks when I yawn. That, and my gums feel like they're dancing. You know this could mean anything from mild inflammation to the early stages of a tooth abscess. More likely, it's age paired with years of chewing barley loaves, baked in sand-lined ovens. You dip your probe in a mixture of warm water and mastic resin, then gently press along her gums. She doesn't flinch, which you take as a good sign, or perhaps just proof she's seen worse. You ask a few questions. She responds with a 3-minute monologue about the time she bit a crocodile. You do not interrupt. For treatment, you use a soft poultice fig sap, crushed date pits, and a bit of lotus oil. You spread it across her gums like a baker frosting a very gritty cake. Then you hand her a rolled bit of linen soaked in dill seed water, instructing her to chew slowly while humming a calming tune. She nods delighted and begins to hum a melody that sounds suspiciously like the brewer's jingle. While she rests, you chat with her daughter, who offers you a small plate of sweet bread and cheese curds. You accept, of course. House calls are hungry work. You learn that the grandmother once claimed to have seen a ghost with perfect teeth, and that ever since she's been brushing twice a day with a twig and serious determination. Historians still argue whether house calls were common in ancient Egyptian healthcare, or if they were a mark of social status. Some suggest they were reserved for priests and nobles. Others argue that even humble healers like you made rounds, particularly in rural areas. You tend to think the truth lies somewhere in between. If someone had enough onions or gossip to trade, you were available. As you pack your tools, the grandmother pats your hand. "You're good," she says, like that one dentist in Thebes, except less sweaty. High praise. You begin your journey back the heat, now retreating behind long, slanting shadows. Along the way, you pass a small shrine where an offering of fish bones and scented oil rests beneath the statue of Sekhmet. You pause, whisper a quick blessing for healthy jaws, and move on. Just as you're nearing your workroom, your apprentice appears panting. "There's a new patient," he says. "A merchant from the next village. He says his teeth are haunted. Haunted. By regret, I think, and figs." You sigh again. "Fine. Prep the incense. We'll smoke the ghosts out." Back inside as the sun dips low and the cool evening air begins to creep across the tiles, you take stock of your day. One hippo, one haunted molar, one very satisfied grandmother, and possibly a ghost infestation. You light your incense burner, let the tendrils drift, and begin organizing your herbs for tomorrow. The copper tools are cleaned again, the linens rinsed. You set aside a dried lotus blossom as a token of thanks to the gods, or the hippo, or maybe just to yourself. Your cat returns from its mysterious adventures, leaps onto your lap, and curls up like a warm question mark. The air smells of mint earth and the kind of quiet satisfaction only found in a day spent fixing other people's problems while slowly developing your own. Your apprentice is now sweeping the floor with the enthusiasm of someone who just realized the broom handle is too short. You watch him for a moment, then gently redirect his attention toward something less likely to injure his spine, organizing the baskets of clove fennel and powdered barley. You need your focus now because your next patient is of loftier social standing, a temple priest, and not just any priest, a priest of Hathor, goddess of love, beauty music, and as it turns out, dental decay. The priest arrives cloaked in fine linen, smelling faintly of lotus, and the kind of self-importance that makes a man announce his name, even if you already know it. You bow, offer him a comfortable seat, and try not to roll your eyes when he groans, as though he's just walked across the Sinai barefoot. "I believe my gums are weeping," he intones solemnly. You resist the urge to say, "So are mine." As you begin your inspection, it quickly becomes obvious this man's teeth are in ruins. Cracks, discoloration, and a suspicious lump along the molar ridge. You peer closer and see remnants of something sticky. "Do you eat many fig cakes?" you ask. "Only twice a day," he replies, "with honey wine." Ah, there it is. The elite of ancient Egypt had it rough dentally speaking, while peasants munched coarse bread and occasionally licked a stone for flavor. The upper class dined on rich meats fruits, soaked in syrup and pastries that would give modern dentists a breakdown. The sugar content alone was enough to turn a healthy molar into a porous sponge of pain within a few decades. Historians still argue whether elite Egyptians received better medical care than the general population. On one hand, they had access to temple physicians and specialist healers. On the other, they insisted on eating like pharaohs, which, incidentally, most pharaohs regretted. Come middle age, you prepare a thick blend of acacia gum-dried thyme and a smear of ground limestone. This will help draw out any infection and coat the sore spot. It's gritty, but it'll do the job. You gently apply the poultice, using a smooth bone spatula. No metal, no sudden movements. Temple priests are not known for their tolerance of pain, especially when they've been fasting for 6 hours and feel as this one does on the verge of divine visitation. He whimpers. You apply a clove oil compress. He sighs dramatically. You adjust your incense burner so the smoke wafts more toward him. He calms almost immediately. Frankincense better than patience. When the treatment is done, he offers you a small tablet bearing the seal of the Temple of Hathor. This is a rare token one that grants access to certain markets, and more importantly, a discount on palm oil. You accept it graciously and offer him a stick of licorice root for continued chewing. As he leaves, he blesses your household and wishes eternal freshness upon your mouth. You thank him and resist the temptation to offer him a toothbrush for the afterlife. Later, as you write notes in your patient ledger, a loosely bundled scroll, secured with twine, you muse on how ironic it is that the richer the diet, the poorer the teeth. The humble workers grinding barley with sandstone often ended up with teeth so worn down they barely had edges left, but at least they didn't rot. The priests, nobles, and royals, though sugar-dried fruit and sweet beer, were a molar's worst nightmare. You think back to that noblewoman last month who came in with 3 cavities and a mouthful of gold leaf. She'd asked if you could remove the pain without disturbing the aesthetic. You'd tried your best. But gold leaf, as it turns out, is terrible at holding paste. There's a soft knock at your doorway. A young girl stands there nervous. She holds a small clay figure, an offering, it seems. Her mother sent her. For the pain in the back, she says, pointing at her own jaw. You welcome her in and seat her on the low stool. She's too small to have the kind of decay adults do, but sure enough, her baby molars are uneven and a bit inflamed. Likely the result of chewing too many tamarind sticks. You clean her teeth gently, using a smaller reed and a dab of mint paste. She winces but doesn't cry, which you take as a small victory. You tell her the clay figure is blessed. Now it will protect her while her teeth grow strong. She smiles gap-toothed and proud. You see her out, and sit for a moment rubbing your hands with scented water. The afternoon light is mellow now, golden and kind. You breathe deeply the smell of thyme frankincense and barley wrapping around you like a warm shawl. Your apprentice returns holding 2 dates and a question. Did the priest actually cry? Or was that just incense in his eyes? You grin, a little of both. You add the Temple of Hathor seal to your collection, placing it beside a feather from a royal messenger's cloak and a pebble that once got lodged in a scribe's molar. Each token tells a story. Each patient leaves behind more than pain. And you're still here. Patch by patch, smile by smile. You're holding this village's teeth together with herbs, copper, and stubbornness. You're midway through your afternoon stretch arms overhead, back popping like a lazy firecracker, when the next patient arrives. A farmer named Hennet, broad-shouldered, sunburned, and smiling the kind of weary smile that says, "I've been chewing rocks," disguised as bread for 20 years. She steps into your workroom, ducking beneath the low lintel, a woven satchel slung over her shoulder, and a chicken tucked under her arm. Not as a pet, as payment. The chicken stares at you with deep judgment. You nod respectfully and gesture for Hennet to sit. You've seen mouths like this before. In fact, you see them all the time. Among the peasant class farmers, builders, brewers, the biggest enemy of oral health is not sweets, but grit. Egypt's bread, a dietary cornerstone, was made from wheat and barley ground, with stone mortars. Over time, tiny flakes of quartz and sand wore down the teeth of anyone chewing those loaves. And they chewed a lot. 3 times a day, often more gnashing through bread that had the texture of warm gravel. You gesture for her to open wide, and what you see isn't surprising. Flattened molars, a few jagged edges, and one back tooth that seems ready to start a new life entirely. There's inflammation along the gum line, probably from stray grains, wedging in and refusing to leave like unwelcome house guests. You begin cleaning with the reed brush first, using a soft mint and licorice powder. Hennet doesn't flinch. In fact, she hums while you work some folk tune about harvest season and the dangers of yams. It's oddly soothing. You pause to rinse her mouth with dill-infused water, then gently probe the angry tooth. It doesn't seem infected yet, just irritated. You mix up a poultice of fenugreek paste and ground sesame, both cooling and mildly numbing. She leans into the touch, eyes closed. Your cat slinks by and eyes the chicken with great interest. You shoo it away before diplomacy fails. As you pack the tooth with the poultice and press a fresh linen strip over it, Hennet grins. "Feels better already," she says. "Don't chew on bricks for at least 2 days," you reply. She hands you the chicken, who flaps indifferently. You place it in the basket beside the bench, where it promptly poops. You sigh. Historians still argue whether common Egyptians had regular access to medical care or relied on community remedies. Some evidence suggests traveling healers and local wise folk treated rural patients. Others argue that while temples held knowledge, only scribes and elites had the means to seek formal treatment. But your experience: if someone knew your name and had a chicken, they'd find you. Later that hour, another farmer visits an older man with a missing front tooth and a proud declaration. "It fell out in the barley field. But I kept chewing. You admire the grit." Literally, he's here for just a check, which translates loosely into "I want to talk about my molars, and also complain about my cousin." You oblige, as he talks about grain prices, missing goats, and the mysterious black cat that now sleeps in his grain bin. You examine his teeth, worn flat, some chipping. A healed abscess scar along the gum line. You nod slowly, then give him a bit of acacia sap gum to chew, both soothing and pleasantly sweet, though slightly sticky. You tell him his teeth are stubborn, which he takes as a compliment. He leaves behind a sack of sorghum and a joke about donkeys with better smiles than priests. You laugh because it's true. By late afternoon, your pouch of poultices is nearly empty. You sit for a while, chewing on a fennel stalk, watching the light fade through your reed-covered window. Outside, a group of children run barefoot, one yelling something about a magic goat with golden teeth. You wonder how many molars those kids will lose before adulthood. You pick up your patient scroll and sketch a quick diagram of Hennet's mouth-flattened molars' ridge erosion. One lucky survivor. You note the success of the fenugreek poultice and underline it twice. You may want to use it again. Your apprentice returns dusty and holding what looks like a bag of river pebbles. These are for grinding the sesame, he explains. You raise an eyebrow. Or for sanding the floor. He shrugs. Both. You smile. Start with the sesame. You glance at the chicken still sitting beside your workbench. It has not moved. You wonder if it's judging your grinding technique or simply napping with its eyes open. In the background, the scent of smoked palm resin drifts through the village, a sure sign that someone nearby is steeping their dinner stew. You think of dinner, maybe lentils, maybe leftover cheese, maybe something that won't shatter your own teeth. You'll decide soon enough. For now, you lean back. Let the chair creak under your weight and close your eyes for a moment. The hum of the village is soothing. Distant laughter, the crackle of firewood, and the shuffle of sandals on dusty earth. You've spent the day treating mouths worn down by life bread and time. And though none of them will write hymns in your honor, they'll sleep tonight without that ache in the jaw. That's enough. You awake from your twilight doze to the delicate sound of something breaking. Probably a jar, possibly your apprentice's sense of self-worth. You crack open one eye and find Khufu staring at the ground in silent horror, shards of terracotta fanned out at his feet. That was the mint jar, he whispers like a man at his own funeral. You nod solemnly. It was already half empty. It was your favorite. Still half empty. He exhales in relief, and you wave him off to sweep it up before the cat tries to investigate. You've got a new case coming in, and it's a weird one. The woman arrives, cloaked in layers of embroidered linen, smelling faintly of temple incense and kitchen garlic. She doesn't sit, doesn't greet you, just lifts her chin and declares, "I've been cursed." Naturally, she explains that her left molar aches during moonlight, and she's convinced a neighbor buried a spell in her garden, one laced with teeth, powder date seeds, and the whisper of a jealous goddess. You do not laugh, because the thing is, this happens a lot. Ancient Egyptian medical care often wove together practical remedies and the spiritual realm. Illnesses weren't always just biological. They were disruptions in the body's harmony with the cosmos. Toothaches. They could be caused by bad bread, yes, but also by an angry ancestor, a misplaced amulet or a deity, miffed about the way you stir lentil stew. You nod gravely and light a fresh stick of Kaifi incense, letting the thick, spicy smoke fill the room. It contains myrrh, juniper, honey, and perhaps a pinch of theatrics. Your patient closes her eyes, and you begin your exam. The molar is indeed inflamed red and tender, likely aggravated by overuse. You apply a warm clove oil compress, laced with cinnamon bark, and a few drops of crocodile fat. Yes, crocodile fat. Not your idea. Someone in Thebes swore by it. Historians still argue whether crocodile-based remedies were common or reserved for ceremonial treatments. Some scrolls imply that animal byproducts were used for their symbolic properties, not medicinal ones. But others, well, let's just say, your storeroom used to smell like a fish market on a dare. After applying the compress, you move to the spiritual half of the treatment. You pull out a cavity charm carved from hippo tusk, shaped like the eye of Horus, with a little cavity etched into the center. You tie it to a thread of blue flax and hang it around her neck. For protection, you say, from the tooth, from whatever wants it more than you do. She nods solemnly. Then comes the incantation, a whispering chant passed down through your family, which translates roughly to, "O great Thoth scribe of all things, please convince this molar to behave." You draw a small line of black coal across her forehead for balance and finish by sprinkling a few seeds of dill into a bowl of water, watching them float like little herbal boats, carrying the pain away. The woman opens her eyes and breathes deeply. It feels calmer, she says. You nod, wiping your hands with lemon-scented cloth. The moon will be gentle tonight. She pays you with a spool of dyed thread and a half-written love poem. You accept both. Later, your apprentice wanders in holding a clay jar and looking confused. I found this in the herb basket. It smells like onions and hope. You take a whiff. That's the old cavity poultice from last winter. It's matured. He looks horrified. You chuckle and tuck it away. Some things like old remedies and fermented gossip need time to ripen. The next visitor is a young man named Many, a basket weaver by trade, and a self-proclaimed tooth whisperer. He claims he can predict weather changes based on his gum pressure. You humor him. Turns out he's got 2 cavities and a grinding habit you can hear from across the room. You offer him a calming spell in the form of a lullaby, sung by Khufu reluctantly. And while he's distracted, you smear a licorice sesame paste onto the worst spot. "Ah," he says, "that tastes like discipline." You smile, exactly what your molars need. Outside, the sky turns dusky pink, the call of herons echoing from the marsh. You open your window shutters to let in a breeze. The scent of river mud, dried herbs, and distant roasting fish floats in. Inside your space now smells like 7 kinds of plant matter and 1 anxious patient's sandals. You spend the rest of the evening organizing your amulet shelf, a mix of charms for toothaches, cheek swelling, and 1 mysterious talisman shaped like a cat yawning. You don't remember where it came from, but you're afraid to move it. You line up the crocodile dung jar beside your most precious vial of powdered lotus root. It's an odd combination, but then again, so is dentistry and magic. And as you light a final taper for the evening and murmur a quiet thanks to Sekhmet for sparing your fingertips today, you glance down at your own reflection in the basin's water. You smile. One of your molars aches just a little. You'll deal with it tomorrow. Khufu is waiting for you the next morning with a nervous smile and a bundle of reeds tied so tightly it looks like a small weapon. It's time he says, as if you've forgotten. You haven't. Today is training day. You glance at the modest pile of practice tools on the workbench. There's a small basket of date pits, a lump of clay, shaped vaguely like a jaw, and a gourd filled with mouth rinse. Somewhere in the corner, your cat is watching with the intensity of a disapproving exam proctor. Khufu has been your apprentice for 6 moons now, long enough to stop trying to eat the clove paste, but not quite long enough to stop accidentally poking patients in the nose. He's eager, bright-eyed, just barely coordinated. "Who's the patient?" he asks. You grin. "You are." He looks horrified. "Wait, what? Not for the probe. For the brush. You'll learn to brush someone else's teeth without flinching." He sits, opens his mouth wide, and nearly drops the reed. You guide his hand gently, slowly, like you're brushing a cat that could press charges. The reed scrapes softly along your molar. It's not unpleasant, but you wince anyway for dramatic effect. Khufu panics, drops the brush, apologizes 12 times. You laugh. Better here than in front of the pharaoh. He stops mid-apology. Will I actually treat the pharaoh someday? Only if he runs out of priests and prefers trembling hands. Truth is, it's unlikely. The royal mouth is considered sacred, treated only by divine physicians or high temple medics. Still, you don't crush the dream. Everyone needs one. You hand him the clay practice jaw and a copper probe dulled for safety. He practices gently pressing around the molars, trying to feel the pretend pain in baked earth. One moment he presses too hard. The jaw cracks. He freezes. "That's a lawsuit," you say calmly. In clay court. He groans. "Can I try on the chicken?" No, the chicken is our patient from Section 7. You return to serious practice. You show him how to roll cotton around the probe's base to reduce abrasion. You let him try mixing a soothing balm he picks too much coriander and not enough honey. The result smells like an anxious salad. You praise the effort anyway. Historians still argue whether dental apprentices in ancient Egypt trained formally or through casual mentorship. Some scrolls reference temple-based medical schools, especially in Memphis or Heliopolis. But most evidence points to a craft passed down in families much like carpentry or baking. You're the second generation. Maybe Khufu will be the third. Later, Khufu fetches a boy from the market for a real but supervised checkup. The boy is chatty proud of his ability to chew sugarcane with both sides of his mouth. You watch carefully as Khufu inspects him, tilts his chin, gently scrapes the plaque, and only once dabs paste on the boy's eyebrow instead of his gum. You don't interrupt. Instead, you step back, arms crossed, letting the hum of the village fill the silence between the boy's giggles. There's something charming in the clumsiness, something deeply human in watching someone care too much to get it right the first time. When the patient leaves mouth-cleaned spirits high, you sit Khufu down and tell him the truth. Most people think we just poke around with sticks and herbs, but we do more. We help people sleep without pain. We let them laugh without flinching. We make chewing less of a gamble. He looks proud, slightly terrified, but proud. For his reward, you give him a chew stick soaked in mint wine, a luxury, and mildly numbing. He grins, and immediately bites his tongue. "Feels like success," he mumbles. Later, you pull out an old bundle of papyrus, your own notes from your training days, drawings of molars shaped like beetles, little margin doodles of teeth wearing sandals. You show them to Khufu. He laughs, then asks the most important question of all. Why are some molars so dramatic? You nod as if this is the oldest debate in dentistry. Some molars just want attention. He seems satisfied with that. As the day winds down, you both clean tools side by side. The copper gleams, the linen strips are folded neatly, and a pot of fig resin paste simmers nearby its scent, somewhere between medicine and dessert. You glance at your apprentice. His brow is furrowed, but his hands are steadier now. You realize with some surprise that you trust him not to jab anyone unintentionally. Probably. The sun slides low across the Nile, casting long golden shadows. The cat yawns dramatically. The chicken clucks once, possibly in approval, and as the warm air carries the distant scent of baked grain and river reeds, you sit back and smile. You've passed on more than skills today. You've passed on patience, confidence, and maybe a legacy of weird, herbal, cozy dentistry. By midday, the sun has turned the courtyard stones into a griddle, and your brain into something approximating lentil paste, which means it's the perfect time for what is universally agreed upon to be the most sacred tradition among dentists, healers, and sandal polishers alike. Lunch break, you roll up your scrolls, hand Khufu a jug of diluted date beer, and retreat to the shaded corner near your back wall. It's cooler here, relatively speaking, and the bench only smells faintly of old garlic. You place your lunch carefully on a low reed mat, a modest portion of honeyed barley bread, a few slices of preserved goat cheese, and the tiniest dab of pomegranate jam you've been hoarding for over a week. Khufu joins you, dragging a basket of herbs he forgot to label, and immediately begins sorting them while chewing. You give him a look. He shrugs, multitasking. You both eat in mostly peaceful silence, interrupted only by the occasional village dog, barking in the distance, and the unmistakable thump of someone dropping a clay jug in the market. As you chew, your mind drifts the way it always does during lunch. You think about the strange lives your patients live, grinding grain at sunrise, hauling stone, weaving baskets, sleeping under stars, and always cracking molars on something. Sometimes it's a date pit. Sometimes it's a bone. One man once claimed it was a curse, but you're pretty sure it was just a badly timed olive. Khufu interrupts your chewing with a question that barely makes it through his mouthful of bread. Did people use lotus petals for breath? You nod slowly. That, and to flirt. He wrinkles his nose. That explains nothing. You decide to share a bit of gossip instead. It's tradition. So remember Neshi, the linen merchant with the suspiciously shiny teeth. The one who says he never chews anything tougher than lentils. That's the one. He came in last week with a chipped incisor. Khufu leans in, let me guess, grinding flax, trying to bite open a papyrus scroll tied with gold wire. He groans. That's not even food. Tell him that. You both laugh, and your cat, always a connoisseur of drama, stretches across the mat like it owns the place, yawning theatrically. Overhead, the breeze shifts slightly, bringing with it the sound of distant riverboats and the scent of roasting chickpeas. You sip your beer slowly. It's lukewarm, slightly fizzy, and exactly what your throat needed after a morning spent muttering over molars. Your neighbors argue gently over the fence, something about tooth charms, and whether the one shaped like a fish brings better luck than the one shaped like a falcon. You smile. You've sold both, sometimes to the same person. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians really used herbal mints or floral petals to manage breath, or if it was more symbolic part of their deep reverence for ritual cleanliness. Whatever the truth, you've treated enough garlic mouths to believe there must have been some kind of communal agreement. If we're all chewing barley, let's at least pretend to smell like lotus. You lean back and let the sun filter through the reed canopy above. You spot a wasp hovering around your jam. You cover it with your palm. Khufu, now stretching himself out like a bored cobra, starts talking about possible mint alternatives, just in case the garden's crop fails. Basil, he suggests. Too strong. Anise. Makes your teeth smell like temple candles. Coriander. Only if you want patients to cry. He goes quiet. A moment later, he offers a slice of melon he somehow acquired without moving. You accept, grateful. The juice runs down your chin, sticky and sweet. You reach for a cloth, only to find your cat sleeping on it. Typical. You take this rare quiet to reflect on how far things have come. When you first started practicing alone, your tools were mismatched, your salves uncertain your hands, nervous. But now your hands move with confidence. Your poultices are almost never lumpy, and your patients trust you enough to bring their children elders, and occasionally livestock. You watch Khufu pour a bit of beer into a bowl for the cat. The cat sniffs it and turns away like it's insulted. You sigh. That's the thanks we get. Lunch winds down slowly. The bread is gone, the jam jar empty except for a final streak you're tempted to lick. You don't. Khufu would judge you even if he doesn't say it aloud. As you gather the remnants, your apprentice brings up the great dental debate, one you've heard more times than the temple bell at solstice. Do we really need to brush every day? He asks. You nod. Yes, but yes. He groans but doesn't argue further. Back inside, you both wash up using a pitcher of cool water laced with dried hibiscus. It leaves your skin scented and slightly pink. Khufu knocks over a drying reed brush, and you catch it mid-air without thinking. He stares. Reflex, you say. He grins. You're like a cobra. I prefer ibis. The afternoon will soon bring another wave of patients, likely tired farmers, over-enthusiastic children, and at least one temple worker with a mysterious gum itch. But for now, you let your shoulders settle, your stomach stretch, and your heart rest. The lunch bell of your soul has rung. You are full, and ready to scrape plaque once more. The moment lunch ends, and you've barely stepped inside, chaos greets you like an overly affectionate goose. A small boy rushes into your practice space, tears streaking down his dusty face, waving what looks like a half-eaten basket lid. It ate the chart, he yells. You blink. What? The goat. Aunt Teddy's goat. It came inside, and there was paper, and it's gone now. You step outside and find evidence of the crime, immediately hoofprints some chewed twine, and the unmistakable scent of livestock-related regret. The clay tablet that once held the patient log has been edited, mostly by teeth. What remains is damp, fragmented, and smells faintly of fermented sorghum. The goat in question is nowhere to be seen, but your cat is perched smugly on the windowsill, like it sold the creature directions. You sigh and usher the boy inside. Which chart? The one for my grandma. She's got the tooth that whistles when she sneezes. Of course. You retrieve what's left of the log enough to deduce the patient's name, age, and favorite hymn. The rest, like which tooth was scheduled for treatment, you'll have to guess. You prep the room while Khufu fetches the patient. He returns a short while later, trailed by a woman with the calm, knowing expression of someone who's lived through childbirth 3 wars, and the invention of reed sandals. You greet her with respect, and seat her on the bench. She smiles kindly, and opens her mouth before you can even ask. Sure enough, tooth 7 on the upper right lets out a soft wheeze as she exhales. You nod. We've found the culprit. She nods back as if she knew it all along. With no chart to rely on, you turn to your other source of truth, your nose. A gentle whiff of sourness confirms mild infection. You probe gently, no visible abscess, but the gums are tender and a bit receded. The tooth itself is likely holding on out of sheer stubbornness. You prepare a salve of myrrh, resin, honey, and mint vinegar, a mix known for its soothing properties and ability to keep conversation partners from fleeing mid-sentence. The paste is applied slowly with a linen swab, while you hum the same lullaby you used earlier with Khufu. It calms patience, and it keeps your rhythm steady. She sighs as the salve begins to take effect. Feels like a nap in a temple, she whispers. Without the incense, you reply. She leaves shortly after, promising to send payment in the form of either beans or news. Both are welcome. You sit down to rewrite the damaged chart from memory. Khufu offers to help pulling out a fresh reed scroll and dipping the nib in charcoal ink. Should I include the part about the goat, he asks, only if it returns for treatment. Historians still debate how ancient Egyptian medical records were maintained. While temple physicians likely used papyrus scrolls or tablets, village healers like yourself relied on memory clay tablets or reed-scripted logs. Unfortunately, goats rarely respected any of these mediums. As you finish writing, a merchant bursts in dramatically holding his jaw and wincing as though auditioning for a tomb painting. What happened, you ask, standing. He moans something that sounds like almond pit. You gesture to the stool. Sit. I'll summon the healing vinegar. Khufu brings the rinsing bowl, cool water infused with sage and licorice. The merchant swishes, sputters, and sighs. You inspect the damage. Chipped incisor, probably minor. But his pain is real, and probably amplified by the fact that his wife told him not to snack on almonds in the bathhouse. You gently smooth the edge, using a flat shard of polished sandstone, one of your most delicate tools. The technique requires steady hands and the patience of a cat stalking sunbeams. You work in silence while he squeezes the bench cushion like it insulted his ancestors. Once done, you finish with a dab of rose oil and powdered barley, a gentle buffer to ease the soreness. He tries to thank you, but mostly ends up whimpering through his nose. Khufu hands him a soft fig cake, which helps. After he leaves, you update your new log with his name treatment, and at Khufu's insistence, a side note warn about almonds. Just as you're catching your breath, the boy from earlier returns with a wide grin. The goat came back, he announces. You freeze. Is it in pain, you ask? He shrugs. It's chewing your broom. You walk outside, and sure enough, there it is. The goat. A beast of no remorse happily gnawing your best palm frond broom, like it's a delicacy from the royal granary. You stare. It stares back. Eventually, Khufu shoos it off with a stick and the promise of celery. You retrieve what's left of the broom, frayed damp and spiritually broken. Back inside, you hang the broom remains on the wall. A reminder, a warning, a very rustic art piece. The sun has dipped slightly now, casting long shadows across the floor. You light a fresh bundle of herbs, lavender thyme, and something labeled simply as anti-goat, and let the smoke drift gently across the room. Khufu leans against the bench. Do you think I'll ever have a day where something doesn't chew part of the clinic? You chuckle. Not if you're doing it right, because dentistry in your little corner of Egypt isn't just about scraping plaque or mixing poultices. It's about chaos, about charm, about remembering which molar squeals in the moonlight and which patient believes figs cause hallucinations. It's about goats and memory, and always keeping a backup chart somewhere high. You're retying your apron while a linen scrap with suspicious stains and a perfect ink blot shaped like a fish when Khufu pokes his head around the corner with the cautious expression of someone balancing a pot of hot barley tea and bad news. There's someone here to see you, he says. You raise an eyebrow. He adds, from the palace. You immediately stop what you're doing. It's not every day you get summoned, or in this case gently requested, to treat someone from the pharaoh's court. You do what any reasonable person would do. You check your breath, straighten your tools, and panic internally. The visitor is waiting just outside your workroom. He's dressed in fine linen rings on 6 fingers, and a scent cloud of cedar oil that could stun a small bird. He doesn't sit. He settles with the practiced grace of someone who's been paid to look important since birth. The pharaoh's cousin, he says without preamble, has a molar. You nod solemnly as if molars are rare and worthy of awe. It is troublesome, he continues. Sharp, loud, very disrespectful. You resist the urge to ask if the molar has been speaking out of turn. Instead, you gather your best tools, your gentlest poultice, and your nicest sandals, the ones with the intact heel strap, and follow him through winding alleys toward the river. The boat that awaits is sleek, carved with hieroglyphs you don't dare misinterpret, and manned by 2 oarsmen who don't blink the entire trip. You try not to touch anything. Khufu is left behind with strict instructions not to rearrange your amulet shelf again. You arrive at a palatial side court near the city's edge, shaded by acacia trees, and quiet, except for the distant coo of doves and the soft rustle of silk garments. You're ushered into a small, cool chamber where your patient waits reclined on a cushioned divan wrapped in gold-threaded linen and looking deeply unimpressed. You bow. She grunts. She is, to be fair, clearly in pain. Her jaw is slightly swollen. One hand clutches a linen square with the desperation usually reserved for war. You set to work. Her mouth reveals a partially erupted wisdom tooth, twisted sideways, angry-looking, and apparently determined to overthrow the rest of her teeth. The swelling is pronounced, the gum tissue inflamed. You glance at your host. Has she eaten recently? He nods. 2 dates a honey roll and possibly a decorative pearl. You do not blink. We'll proceed gently. You begin by cleaning the area with a rinse of mint coriander and warm myrrh water, careful not to touch the sore directly. Then you prepare your most potent poultice ground, aloe leaf turmeric, and a few drops of sandalwood oil mixed into a thick, numbing paste. This is your noble blend, normally reserved for high priests or particularly whiny scribes. She flinches as you apply it, then relaxes. Her shoulders drop a little. You even catch what might be a snore. You count that as a win. As you continue treatment, the palace aide observes with mild interest. Do you know? He says the old priest at Karnak claims that wisdom teeth were a gift from Sobek. You pause. Because they arrive with pain, he adds, but grant you patience. You nod slowly. Historians still argue whether that was wisdom or just dental propaganda. He chuckles an actual chuckle and hands you a strip of embroidered cloth. A token, he says, from the court. You finish your work, leaving a small packet of soothing powder and strict instructions not to chew anything firmer than stewed lentils for 3 days. The patient does not thank you, but she does fall asleep. You take that as royal approval. You're escorted back to the river with slightly more fanfare than before, though the oarsmen still do not blink. The cloth token sits safely in your pouch, next to a tiny shell you picked up near the divan-polished spiral, and oddly comforting. Back at your practice, Khufu greets you with tea eyebrows raised. Well, he asks. She didn't bite me. Success. You settle into your seat and untie your sandals. Your feet sigh audibly. What was wrong? Wisdom tooth. Khufu gasps. One of the cursed kind. No, just the sideways kind. He grimaces. Those are worse. You prepare a fresh salve for the next patient, but your mind drifts back to that palace room. Its silence, its carved pillars, and the sleeping cousin of the most powerful man in Egypt, soothed by a humble mix of aloe and sandalwood. It strikes you then how small all mouths are, no matter their title. How pain flattens hierarchies. How a molar can humble even a woman, wearing a belt worth more than your entire practice. And as you light your end-of-day incense, a blend of frankincense, dried rose petals, and olive leaf, you think of how strange it is that your hands so often dipped in vinegar and date paste have become tools of both healing and diplomacy. You are not just a dentist. You are a translator of toothaches, an alchemist of aching jaws. And today, your work was royal. Evening has crept in on papyrus-colored skies, and your workroom is bathed in the kind of light that makes everything feel like it's been dipped in honey. You move more slowly now, your limbs warm and heavy, your thoughts scattered like dried coriander on the breeze. This is the part of the day you love most, not because it's over, but because it softens. Fewer emergencies, fewer impatient molars, fewer questions about whether mint leaves can cure heartbreak. Spoiler only, the mild kind. It's time for winding down, and for one of your favorite rituals, the wisdom tooth jar. The jar sits quietly on a shelf behind your workbench, nestled between a bottle of lotus oil and a carved wooden cat figurine you use as a paperweight. It's small terracotta, with a lid shaped like a sleeping crocodile. Inside, a handful of discarded teeth, mostly wisdom teeth, though the occasional molar or bicuspid has snuck in. You don't keep them out of medical necessity. No, you keep them because they're oddly beautiful, smooth from years of work, some still flecked with specks of gold, from noble fillings, others bearing the faint grooves of someone who once chewed papyrus stems while reading contracts. Each one tells a story, and tonight, like most nights, you take a few minutes to sift and remember. You pick up a particularly round one, a former temple musician's tooth if memory serves. She had sung hymns while you treated her each note a vibration through the stool. You smile softly. That one had fallen out on its own. No drama, just decided to retire. Khufu wanders in holding a cup of barley milk and a thin reed scroll he pretends he's studying. He glances at the jar, counting your victories, he asks. Only the ones that stayed with me. He leans on the bench watching, as you gently clean a new addition, a tiny wisdom tooth barely formed from a boy, no older than 10, who'd come in with a pebble in his mouth, and left proudly holding a clove in his cheek. Do you think teeth remember Khufu asks more out of tired curiosity than philosophical intent? Some of them, do you say? The loud ones especially. Outside the village begins to quiet. Cooking fires pop softly in the distance. A woman hums near the well. Somewhere far off, a lyre plays a slow, drifting tune. The kind you don't listen to, just breathe to. You prepare your evening incense, a personal blend, lavender sprigs, charred fig bark, and a thread of old papyrus dipped in cinnamon oil. The scent is grounding smoke-sweetness memory. You light it slowly, wafting the spiral trail through the corners of the room. Your cat shifts positions, curls tighter. The goat you've been assured has finally been returned to its proper owner, though whether it learned anything is up for debate. You place the latest tooth into the jar, fitting it into a hollow near the back like a puzzle piece. With a soft clink, it becomes part of the strange, secret collection you've built over the years. A museum of molars. A library of lives etched in enamel. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian dentists collected teeth for ritual research or superstition. You suspect it's all three. There's something oddly comforting about keeping these little bits of people cleaned, catalogued, remembered not as trophies, but as testaments. You wrap up your tools in linen cloth, lay them on the bench, and sprinkle a handful of dried mint and thyme nearby to keep away ants' spirits and overly ambitious rodents. Khufu yawns. Do you think I'll have a wisdom tooth worth keeping? You grin. That depends. Will it be wise? He mutters something unrepeatable and slinks off to clean the herbal jars, leaving you to your thoughts. You take one final sip of hibiscus water and lean back against the wall. The incense smoke has now woven itself into the air like a lullaby. You feel it wrap around your shoulders, soft and warm. The wisdom tooth jar gleams faintly in the lamplight, each tooth a whisper from the past, a reminder that even the tiniest pieces of us carry stories. You stretch your legs, feel the cooling floor beneath your soles, and close your eyes, just for a moment. No patience, no pain, just moonlight brushing the wall, and the quiet hum of a village finally ready to sleep. Your dreams come easily tonight, sliding into your mind like soft linen over tired shoulders. But they don't feel like dreams, exactly, more like drifting into memory, or into a place that smells a lot like your workroom, but is infinitely quieter and just a touch surreal. You find yourself walking along the banks of the Nile, though the ground beneath your feet feels like cotton, and the river looks unusually clean. The stars overhead are massive, as if they've drifted down for a closer look at your sandals. You carry no tools, no satchel, not even a reed pen. Just a bundle of floss impossibly fine, and a quiet sense that you are very much off duty. The reeds hum with a wind you can't feel. There's no pain here, no aching molars or infected gums. Just the gentle awareness of every tooth you've ever tended, like each one is a bell that's finally stopped ringing. You sit on a stone near the river's edge and begin tying the floss into little loops. Why? No reason. That's just what one does here. A tooth floats by. You blink. It bobs in the current like a tiny boat, serene and purposeful. Then another, and another. Each one is different. Some chipped, some smooth, one painted gold, with ridiculous confidence. They float silently as if they're heading somewhere important, and you understand in that dream logic kind of way that this is where all teeth go when they've done their work. The tooth Nile, perhaps. Sacred, silly, inevitable. Suddenly you're not alone. A woman made of moonlight appears beside you, vague, glimmering, with a smile that's missing exactly one incisor. She gestures toward the water. You did well, she says. You calmed the loudest ones. You bow unsure of how one greets a spectral molar guardian. She disappears with a wink, leaving behind a bundle of fresh mint and a reed shaped like a toothbrush. You continue your walk, the ground becoming marshy, then firmer, then tiles. You're back in your practice, though now everything is gleaming. The jars are full. The shelves are in perfect order. The chicken is still here, but wearing a necklace. You hear the distant laugh of Khufu, and the jingle of temple bells, and the unmistakable sound of someone unwrapping a date with their teeth. Your hands move automatically, preparing a salve of cinnamon and fig root, though no one is here. You spread it on a linen strip, fold it neatly, place it in a small clay jar, and set it beside the wisdom tooth jar, and then you lie down, right there on the cool tile floor. It doesn't seem strange at all, because, in this version of your practice, there are no patients, just the memory of them. You've done your part. Their pain is gone, Their stories live on in teeth and herbs, and awkward apprentice sketches of molars with eyebrows. You close your eyes. The scent of lavender hovers above you. The air tastes like honey and powdered clove. Somewhere in the distance, a boatman calls for passengers, but not yet. You turn on your side curl into a crescent and let the dream drift. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian healers ever dreamed of the afterlife in such quiet ways, whether their gods visited them in sleep, or whether it was just exhaustion, gently whispering. But you've lived this work long enough to recognize when the pain has finally gone quiet, and for tonight at least, even the teeth are sleeping. The soft sound of sandals scuffing against the doorway stirs you gently from your reverie. It's not a dream anymore, just dusk again. The kind of dusk that hugs the walls in gold and shadow. You blink slowly, feeling the weight of the day still resting on your shoulders like a warm towel. Khufu stands in the entrance, silhouetted against the waning light. He speaks softly. "There's one more." You nod. "Of course there is." You rise slow but steady and stretch the way old linen stretches quietly, with the knowledge that you've done this hundreds of times before. You light a small cone of sandalwood incense, not to impress anyone, just to remind yourself that the end of the day deserves ceremony. Your final patient arrives with a soft cough and a sheepish look. He's a fisherman you've treated twice before once, for a chipped tooth caused by a rebellious fish bone, and once for biting into a rock he'd mistaken for a dried plum. A frequent flyer. He sits down heavily, removing his headcloth and rubbing his jaw. "Same one," he mutters. You smile already, pulling out your salve kit. This time, the issue seems to be swelling nothing dramatic. Just a dull, persistent ache in a tooth that refuses to quit. You wash your hands with hibiscus water, dip a linen cloth into a freshly warmed eucalyptus and cumin mixture, and begin your work. He breathes steadily, eyes closed, shoulders rising and falling like small boats on a sleepy Nile. You apply the compress and hum a lullaby, one you heard sung by a grandmother in a marketplace years ago. The tune curls around the room, like the smoke, slow, circular, peaceful. He doesn't speak again. He doesn't need to. You finish by securing the poultice with a soft binding of flax thread. A quiet treatment. A quiet man. The kind of appointment that feels less like healing and more like honoring. As he rises to go, he presses a small stone into your palm. Not payment. A thank you. It's shaped vaguely like a fish, or a molar depending on how much you squint. You nod, slipping it into the pocket of your robe, and walk him to the door. The air outside is cool now, touched by river fog, and the faintest hint of roasted lentils from a nearby home. Back inside, the world hushes. Khufu lights the evening lamps. Your cat stretches from its perch, and then promptly falls asleep again without further involvement. You put away your tools with care. Each reed brush, each bronze probe, each carefully folded scrap of gauze finds its home. You wipe down your bench with dill water, sprinkle a few crushed fennel seeds near the window to ward off ants, and place a fresh charm near the door, a carved ibis with a chipped wing. You like it that way. Finally, you sit, on your stool, in your space, surrounded by your strange, fragrant world of soft powders, warm oils, and stories that live in every jar. Khufu joins you with 2 cups of barley milk. He hands you one without a word. You clink them gently, a toast without ceremony, just understanding. The lamps flicker. The goat has not returned. The scrolls are rolled. The wisdom tooth jar is closed for the night. and your hands finally still rest in your lap. You've cleaned, soothed, poulticed, and hummed. You've worked on rich jaws and poor gums, on believers in spells and skeptics with sinus complaints. You've taught. You've healed. You've remembered. And now, you rest. You lean back just a little, the bench creaking softly beneath you. The world beyond the walls grows quieter, still less of a place, more of a hum. Outside, the moon floats above the rooftops, pale and round like a polished seed. It casts gentle shadows across the courtyard, turning clay walls silver and smoothing every harsh line into velvet. The river, somewhere unseen, whispers to the reeds. You close your eyes. The room smells like mint and soot. Faintly smoky, faintly sweet. Your shoulders loosen. Your breath slows. You can almost hear the day sighing as it releases its weight. The poultices, the charts, the awkward conversations about molars and marriage proposals, gone now, drifting off like incense in a breeze. Everything feels settled. Even your cat curled up in a basket has stopped pretending to supervise. The chicken snores. Probably. In the silence, you let your mind float gently backward over jars of crushed resin, over mornings that began with barley tea, and toothaches over reed brushes lined in tidy rows. You see the smiling faces, the grateful ones, the worried ones, the ones who never said thank you but returned over and over because something in you said you're safe here, and now you're safe too. The floor is cool beneath your feet. Your eyelids are heavy, and the last thing you feel is the warmth of sleep brushing your cheek, like a thumb smoothing away a frown. You are a dentist. You are a healer. You are home. Shh. Sleep now. The teeth will wait.